Hi, Taylor T. Carlson back with another video for you. You know that I'm a film buff at this point. If you've been watching this channel or following the reviews I do for any period of time, that's pretty obvious. Now, every year, twice a year, Barnes & Noble stores will do a Criterion Collection sale where all the Criterion Collection movies they have are half off for a limited time. Usually they do this once in the summer and then once in the fall, and every time I become a part of this sale, I always spend too much, and I actually managed to pace myself this last time, but I did pick up one thing, and that's this. Bruce Lee, his greatest hits. This is a new set from Criterion combining all of the major movies that Bruce made in his lifetime. Probably the most famous martial arts movie star of all time. Hell, he's probably the most famous martial artist of all time. So when I found out there was a collection of his films available and it was half off on account of the Criterion Collection sale, I wasn't going to pass this up. Anyway, this is an outer cover. This comes open, and just going to do the unboxing first before I get down to everything else. And then this actually folds open. So here's just a look at what this is like. Fully folded open, and there's overlapping discs with the exception of disc 7 here. And if you've bought Criterion releases before, you know that they usually come with a booklet that has some pretty interesting information, and this might actually be Criterion's best work yet. They made the booklet in the style of an old martial arts magazine with Bruce Lee on the cover, and then here's the back cover. And I'm just going to show a few highlights from in here. I'm not going to show off every single page. There's the table of contents page right there. This thing's a little flimsy because it's folded, but we'll move on. So you got descriptions of the films, lists of the casts, and things like that. And then there's, additional essays as well. And one of my personal favorite highlights, they even have one of those old ads where you mail something in to learn Kung Fu. Obviously, this is fake, and if you mail that in, you're not going to get anything back. I don't even think there's an address to send it to there. But moving on, let's talk about what's actually in this set now. The first movie in the set is The Big Boss, which stars Bruce Lee as someone moving to live with his extended family, and he gets a job in a factory, only to discover that the factory is just a front, and the owners are actually drug dealers. This is probably the weakest movie in this collection just because the pacing's a little off and it does drag in places, but once Bruce starts cutting loose, of course he does what he does best, and overall I think it has a pretty satisfying conclusion despite all that. Second movie in the collection is Fist of Fury, and this one, Bruce Lee is a martial arts student of a school, and he returns home only to find that his martial arts master has died. Meanwhile, they end up getting harassed by members of another school, and they come to realize that maybe this other school has something to do with their master's death. There's admittedly not a ton to the plot here, but there doesn't really need to be. When you have two rival martial arts schools ready to go up against one another, and Bruce Lee ready to go out there and do what he does best, that's pretty much all you need, and this movie certainly delivers when it comes to the action, and it's a step up from the first movie in the collection and a solid entry in this collection overall. The third movie in this set is The Way of the Dragon. This is the only full-length finished film that was ever directed by Bruce Lee. This one's a little more comedic, and it involves him going to Rome where he ends up finding that there's a restaurant and the owners are being harassed by local mobsters into selling and basically being extorted, so he has to teach Kung Fu to a lot of the people working in the restaurant, and he has to step into action. This is one of the better movies in the collection. Like I said, it's more comedic, so I would say that this is maybe a little more accessible than some of the earlier ones in the collection, and of course the action scenes do not disappoint. One of the real highlights of this is that one of the major martial arts villains in the movie is played by Chuck Norris, and this was actually Chuck Norris's first feature film appearance. The fight between the two of them at the end of the movie amidst the Roman ruins is definitely one of the highlights of this collection. On disc 4 we have Enter the Dragon, which is by far the most famous of all of Bruce Lee's films. This was actually a Hollywood production, and in this one, Bruce and several other martial artists are on their way to an isolated island where they're going to fight in a martial arts tournament, but it turns out that the tournament and the island are a front for an evil lord who's actually a drug dealer, and he's using this to cover up his operations. There's a female operative supposedly already on the island, so Bruce is told to get in there and get what information he can. Enter the Dragon feels like a mashup between a martial arts movie, a blaxploitation movie, and even a James Bond movie. You get the impression that director Robert Clouse had actually watched a lot of James Bond movies, and they were a lot of his inspiration for this movie. That's not necessarily a bad thing because the emphasis still remains on Lee overall, although there are some other strong performances, and you definitely see a lot of highlights throughout this movie. This disc features the shorter theatrical cut, and the extended cut is actually on one of the supplement discs. The fifth and final main film that's in here is Game of Death, which Clouse, the director of Enter the Dragon, actually finished following Bruce Lee's death. Lee had actually filmed some footage for the movie, which was going to involve a battle up a tower with a different opponent on each floor, but the reworked movie directed by Clouse, which largely uses body doubles to serve Bruce's role, along with some footage that he'd filmed prior to his death, ends up feeling almost, in some ways, even more James Bond-like than Enter the Dragon. The opening title sequence is pure James Bond, and John Barry, the score composer most associated with the Bond franchise, even scored this movie. It's actually not bad for what it is, as long as you don't come in expecting like a pure Bruce Lee movie, because obviously you're going to be seeing more of the body doubles and quite a bit of stock footage and insert shots here and there, but for what it is, Clouse actually managed to put together a pretty good movie. There is a supplement on this disc, which is a bonus feature, which is only footage that was shot by Bruce Lee and directed by him prior to his passing. He'd actually filmed this footage prior to Enter the Dragon and planned to come back and finish the film, but sadly, he passed away from a cerebral edema before he was even able to see Enter the Dragon get released, although he did complete that film. The two supplement discs also include Game of Death 2, which was another similar sequel, although unrelated to the first Game of Death, which is an amalgamation of stock footage of Bruce along with newly shot footage and a lot of outtake footage from Enter the Dragon. Supplement Disc 7 actually features the extended version of Enter the Dragon, which is the one that's mainly been available on home video formats in recent years. In true Criterion fashion, all of these films look very good. There are a few limitations based on the filmmaking techniques of the day and the source material, but as is, the movies actually look very good. I assume they've received some sort of remastering treatment. I'll bet that information's in the booklet. I admit I didn't read every single word in the booklet, but what you need to know is the movies look damn good, and they certainly do justice to this material and to the legacy of Bruce Lee. As far as audio tracks go, they all default to like the main audio track, which in the case of the earlier films is the foreign language track, whereas of course Enter the Dragon is in English because it was a Hollywood production. And I only watched these with the default tracks. I did sample the others just a little. Some of the dubbed content, particularly in the Game of Death 2, result in some really corny, cheesy, bad dialogue moments that are laughably horrible. But honestly, I think in a lot of ways it adds to the charm of things. Supplement-wise, I'm happy to say that Criterion does not disappoint here either. The movies all have some additional newly filmed bonus features with criticisms and information on Bruce Lee's career, as well as some interesting information from the past. There's some older vintage stuff that tends to run a little shorter. On the Game of Death disc, like I said, we also get just footage that was shot and directed by Bruce prior to his death. This even includes a fight scene with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who, believe it or not, was a student of Bruce Lee's. This, of course, being several years prior to his role in Airplane. Of course, most of the world knows him for his NBA career, but he actually did have a few acting roles, believe it or not. And once you get this set, there's going to be no shortage of content to go through. I admit I have not sat through every single bonus feature in this collection, but fans of Bruce Lee will not be disappointed with what they find here. Are you a Bruce Lee fan? Have you had a chance to pick up this collection yet? If you have, let me know what you think. Do you own any other releases of these films, and how do those stack up? Comment down below and let me know what you've got to say. Also remember to like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe to my channel. I'm Taylor T. Carlson, and I will be seeing you in my next movie review.